And I would like to start with an anecdote. So I'm doing sabbatical here at Cornell. And one day, I was leaving the Corson Hall, going to the Uris Library to work there. It's a wonderful place. And I was thinking, who was Corson? I mean, there are so many names on the buildings here, so you don't really know who are these guys, but that's good, or women, but that's good to be able to find out this. So I went into the library and I said, okay, Dale Corson, who was he? And I discovered he was a very well-known professor in physics. And actually, maybe he was one of the scientists who had the hardest time to find evidence because he discovered a new element. I mean, he discovered the astatine, which is 80 in the periodic table. And actually, the astatine is an element which is represented in less than 1 gram on the Earth's surface at a given moment, because actually it's really unstable. And Corson was able to synthesize the astatine and to prove the existence of this new element. So maybe he was struggling a lot, maybe to find some evidence that was not easy to get. And what I discovered also when I looked at this impressive professor is that he was president of the university in very difficult times. In the early 70s, there was some conflict with students, the Vietnam War and recession. And then I discovered that he received the most prestigious award from the National Academy of Science. So I don't know if you know what is the most prestigious award of the Academy of Science, and I didn't know this time. So I did some statistics in my department, and I went to interview several professors there in the Corson Hall, some of my colleagues, and I asked them, what is the most prestigious award that the National Academy of Science can award to a researcher? So everybody told me, everybody, I mean, I like 15 out of 15, the good evidence of this, that the most prestigious award is to be part of the National Academy of Science. And then, when you're part of the Academy of Science, if you want something even better, you can be nominated and have the prize of the president of the National Academy of Science. That is, for scientists, for the evidence producers, this is the best prize they can have. So then I look at the prize that Corson received. And when you go on the website of the National Academy of Science, they say, the National Academy of Science Public Welfare Medal is the Academy's most prestigious award and is presented annually to honor extraordinary use of science for the public good. And actually, when you look at what received Corson, he didn't receive like anything for the astatine or his life as a physicist. But he received an award for, I cite, the National Academy of Science for his extraordinary contributions toward bringing science to the service of all segments of our society as an educator, administrator, and central figure in the formulation of science policy. And this is, for the National Academy of Science, the best award you can give. So I was really impressed as a young scientist, well, not so young, but as a scientist, who really think about this hard science and the fact that in my head also maybe the best award the National Academy of Science can give it to be part of the National Academy. And there I was really surprised by this. I mean, I didn't expect that would be the most prestigious award of the Academy. And when I say this to my colleagues, they say, oh, this is rubbish. This is not really the best award that the Academy can give. This is really to be part of the National Academy of Science. So I think that this example just is a good highlight about what we are talking today about. And it's to try to fill this gap between the knowledge that researcher and the view that researchers have about the evidence that they produce and what it is used for and how it is like acknowledged by the society, and how this knowledge can be an evidence on which we can base some policy needs. So to keep on a bit on what I would like to say this morning, I would like to maybe to highlight from my perspective and from my experience as a researcher, mainly in South America, three issues that I think that are important because they control if a scientist will engage or not engage as an evidence producer. And the three topics are one, methodology, incentives, and three, culture. And I would like to think about this with you now. So about the methodology, I think that one important point, and this is something that I really experienced when I was working in Ecuador and Colombia, is that you need to think about the kind of evidence you want to produce before starting your experiment. And this is what you said, Monica. I mean, there are different kind of knowledge, testimony, like hard science, observation. And what we really experience in our research is that it would be really good to have a diversity of evidences. I mean, not evidence that come only from researchers, but maybe from different voices. So how do you do this really as a scientist when you want to work on a particular issue? So I was mainly working on integrated pest management in Ecuador. And we were funded by a McNabb Foundation to try to find some new ways of fighting against insect and pests in crops and to reduce the level of pesticide that were used. So we just put in place some experiments to have some biocontrol of pests based on parasitoids and other kind of biological control. And so we had this from, as a researcher, I mean, we did it in agronomy research station, well-controlled condition, and then we went to the field and we tried this. And we realized actually that to have the farmers not choosing the pesticide, it was not only this kind of evidence that they were looking for. So then we did what is called the participatory research, which is well developed, especially in the tropics. And we try to work with some of the farmers and so that they can also try the kind of biocontrol agent that we had developed. But then it was not only sufficient to work with farmers, but what we really figured out is that it would be interesting to work with a huge diversity of farmers and also other stakeholders. And actually it was funny because we made a very breakthrough in the use of pesticide in this particular place of Ecuador nearby the city of Riobamba, because what we did is that we involved the mayor of Riobamba city. So the mayor has a small field here, and we were talking to him and say, oh yes, I have some problem with this pest, and what can I do? So we told him, oh, you can use this kind of stuff. Well, it's not really in the market, but just try it. And the mayor used it. And well, he used it like this. I mean, there was no control, there was no replication, there was not like very strong science, but he used it. And the voice of the mayor was a very good voice for us. I mean, the mayor said, yes, it works, and then the farmers were, yes, it's work, and then the university there, yes, it's work. So we had some different voices. And we built up kind of evidence that was much stronger that we could have developed only as a researcher. So this is why I think that the methodology and the way we produce this knowledge is and this evidence is very important. The second point I would like to talk to you is about incentives. And in particular, from the academy, I think that we are still in a kind of sometimes ivory tower, a bit disconnected from society. And also I think that even if there are like incentives to make researchers working together, we still need more of them. I mean, transdisciplinarity is really important to achieve this kind of, I think it's my belief that it's important to have some very good evidence-based policy needs. And when I'm talking about transdisciplinarity, because it's something that I teach to my students, I have a slide which is, maybe you know, it's an elephant, and then you have 5 blind people, and so the blind people were like this and trying to know what is an elephant. So one is taking the trunk and say, oh, an elephant is like a snake. And the other one is taking the legs. Oh, an elephant is like a trunk. Another one is on the back of the elephant. Oh, an elephant is like a brush. And the other one, the tail. An elephant is like a rope. And there is even one in the poo of the elephant. And well, an elephant is like soft and mushy. So there's some different kind of seeing a same element, an elephant. And actually, this is something also that experience in my own research in Ecuador. I was still working on this nasty crop pest, and we were trying to understand how to adapt our integrated pest management to different places in Ecuador. So what we figured out is that really we needed to trigger some specific management depending on the altitude, because these pests were living at different altitudes. We didn't find the same pest at the same altitude. They were really similar, and the farmers couldn't tell apart, couldn't say the difference between the pests, but actually there was some difference. So we were starting using the evidence of this about the segregation in altitude of the pest to build on our policy making, doing some IPM. And then I invited a friend of mine who is a sociologist to work on this, and I said, okay, when you will go there, you will see it's very simple. I mean, you have an altitudinal gradient, so you will see the different communities of pests there. And so it just helped me to frame what he was doing. And he came back 2 days after and say, you're totally wrong. It is not an altitudinal gradient, but you have here some people that have an income which is very low and are Christians, and the other one that is higher and almost they are Protestant, very different social life. And he told me, if you want to target integrated pest management there, you don't need to understand only the altitudinal gradient, but also these differences between, and this evidence in terms of social and economical situation that I didn't see because I'm not an economist, I'm not a social scientist. So this made me really think that we need more about this transdisciplinarity. There are some efforts done by the academy, by the foundations to do this, but still I think we need much more of it. And I would like to give you my last point, which is about culture, and I know that in the afternoon maybe some panels will talk more about this, but I think that really between policy making and science we live in different worlds. And I was looking on the internet about this, and I found 2 articles. One has been published in Nature in 2013. It's written by William Sutherland, with a very famous conservation biologist. So this is 20 tips for interpreting scientific claims. And he said that this list will help non-scientists to interrogate advisors and to grasp the limitation of evidence. So if you haven't read it, I advise you to do it. And then, a couple of months later, there was another article that was a kind of response to this article. This one was published in The Guardian, so a different public, but in the science section of The Guardian. And it was written by Chris Tyler, and at this time Chris Tyler was the director of the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology in the European Union. And he wrote a paper about top 20 things scientists need to know about policy making. And there are some common misunderstandings about scientists, about how governments make their policy decision. So when you read these 2 papers, it's funny because you have these 20 tips, and the 20 tips are really different. I mean, so I can just give you some of them. For example, for the 20 tips for policymakers, so correlation does not imply causation. So this is punchy stuff still. I don't know if it rings a bell to everybody, but regression and the mean can mislead. Extrapolating beyond the data is risky. Or significance is significant. Okay, so you can read about this. I think sometimes I don't really understand everything, and then when you could look at the paper by the Chris Tyler, it was different. The first one was, making policy is really difficult. That's a good message for scientists that they can know. And then, no policy will ever be perfect. Another one that someone talked about this, it was, policymaker can be expert too. That's true that sometimes when a scientist arrives in the room, there are only policymakers. Say, okay, they don't know anything about what I'm talking about. I can say anything. And I just saw this also when I went to some places with the French Agency for Development, for example, other places, that they know a lot about this. And policymakers are not a homogeneous group, interesting, and policy decisions are subject to extensive scrutiny. But So this is bad news because I thought that the dialogue was quite different, but there is a good news in this. Is that in these two lists, there is something which is the same advice or the same tip. And in this list, for the science list, this is scientists are human. And in the Guardian, it was policymakers are human too. So I think it's good news. I mean, I don't think if it's really good news, actually, because we are human and maybe we don't need to trust human. But actually, well, we are both human and maybe we can do something together. Okay, so I just would like to conclude maybe with another anecdote I have. This is when I first met Parfait. So he invited me to go to his office just to prepare this kind of talk. I didn't know him. I was put in contact by my boss, who is the director of the French Institute for Research and Development, and actually is also part of this expert panel in the UN about sustainable development goals. And I told a story to Parfait, and we started to think about this. And I told a story about my boss, who is asking the researcher in the institute, who are like 1,000 people researcher working in different places in the world, in France. And he told them, you need at the same time to be able to apply to ERC grants. And you know ERC, this is the most prestigious grant in Europe, the European Research Council. These are grants of excellence. I mean, they are really competitive and really hard to get, and you need to have a very strong background in science to do this. So you need to be able to apply to the ERC. And at the same time, you need to be able to get some fundings by the World Bank or the French Agency for Development. And for me, these are really two different things. I mean, maybe in medicine, for example, you're very good in virology, you're an expert in virus, and then you can do some stuff with Ebola. I mean, there can be more connection maybe in medicine. But for example, for an ecologist, I mean, I need to do some theoretical ecology to be able to be well recognized in my field. And sometimes it's hard to apply it to the modern world. So what I'm telling, what I told to Jean-Paul, and this is something that we told and discussed with Parfait, is that, Jean-Paul, you want us to do the grand écart. So this is the only French word that we use today, the grand écart. So there are some francophones here. They understand. So the grand écart, when you translate it to French, this is the leg split. You know this figure we can do, the leg split. But actually, when you take the French word, it's more like a large gap. So when you try to do this grand écart, which is quite hard to do, you have two chairs, you put one foot on the one and the other one on the other one. So this could be science and this could be policymaker. And this is what my boss wants me to do, this kind of grand écart between both of them. And we were talking with Parfait. Oh yes, the grand écart, it's a good image because maybe it's hard to do this and it's painful and you need to practice to do this. So it could be a kind of image about this. So I would like to end with this. I think that to be able to engage as researcher and to do this kind of jump to the policy making and have our knowledge and our evidence be used by the policy making, we need to practice really. We need to practice to try to do this grand écart. And I think that these people who got the public welfare medal, for example, Jane Lubchenco, she is a very famous marine biologist. She is the kind of woman who did some really nice grand écart on this because very hard science and at the same time good policy making evidence. So this is my final message. I think that to be able to do this as a researcher, we need to practice and try to do this grand écart. Thank you very much.